Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome. In this short-ish video, I'm going to show you how to set up your first profile and application in InstructBot alongside with your very first basic and some intermediate commands. I'm going to briefly touch on some of the options, but I'm going to assume that you've already done your initial setup, linked your Twitch account, and the donation and alert service of your choice. Now I'm going to go over these commands with the example of Escape from Tarkov, since that one seems to be quite popular with the bot. So without further ado, let's head straight to the options. Now once you're in the bot, I want you to head on over to the options, and this first one is especially for people like me. We like to use the bot as a chat interface as well. So I want you to head on over to the environment, go to the console, and just slide that color name slider to the left. After that, you can select a font size and a font that you're familiar with and that you can work with. You can also go ahead and adjust the row spacing if need be. Also, while you're here, you can select highlighting for your moderator or your VIPs. Now, this is strictly optional and is only helpful if, like I said, you're using the bot as a chat interface as well. Now, next up, I want to quickly go over the integrations. I'm going to assume, like I said, that you've already set this up, but in case you haven't, simply go ahead and select your donation and alert service of your choice and slide over enable integration with your service. After that, you want the service to respond to tips, and while you're setting things up, it's always nice to have to respond to testing events as well. If you've been using the loyalty system from Streamlabs or StreamElements before, you can of course still use those points accumulated. Now after that, you can head on over to the Twitch integration. This is for basic functionality. So as you can see, I have ticked off all of these because I don't want the bot to automatically update Twitch's category to match the selected application name, and I don't want to automatically update the title of my stream to match the current title set in InstructBot. If you so desire, you can of course do so, but it's not my cup of tea. The one thing I use is a custom bot. This is helpful if you have an alternate account that is used as a bot in your channel, so you can stay on brand while using InstructBot. This will change every posted chat message by the bot to your secondary account. Now, while we're here, I also want to touch on the notifications, because the bot allows you to post a lot of stuff to chat. As you can see, I have disabled all of these. I've only selected a few that could get confusing for viewers if not enabled, such as the swap mouse button or the execute command and the use command as well. Now down here is where you can select and type in flavor text to, well, kind of match your streaming persona. All right, with that out of the way, we can go ahead and create our first profile. That I want you to go on to your profiles on your nav bar, and for an example, I'm going to use Escape from Tarkov, so I'm going to create a new profile with the add button in the bottom left corner, and I'm going to just simply call it Tarkov. I've not selected an application for this yet, and I don't have any commands I want to run with it, so I'm just going to enable it for the time being. And if you're only running Tarkov or whatever application you're setting up, you can of course go ahead and select default, so all your commands will default to this profile. Now I want you to hit apply, and now come on over to the applications tab. Same deal, bottom left corner, we're going to add one, and I'm going to call this EFT. Now at this point, you want to make sure that the application you want to target is already running, and now you can use the drop-down menu to select whatever application it is you want to control, or when you're running windowed mode for the bot, you can simply drag and drop this target window onto the target application. And once you've done that, I want you to switch on over to profiles, and we're going to select the profile we just created for, in this case, Tarkov. After that, head on over back to the General tab, hit Apply, and we're good to go. Now, while we're here, there's one thing I like to do for all my games because it opens up a whole new set of commands we can toy with, and that is the relative mouse configuration. Now, what the relative mouse configuration allows you to do is, for example, 360 degrees turns, depending on where you're facing in game at the time of execution. Now, this comes down to a few factors like your screen size, your in-game resolution, and maybe even your mouse DPI. So this is, from my experience, down to a best guesstimate. So I'm going to start off with 5,000 on the horizontal and 2,500 on the vertical amount. We're going to come back to this and fine-tune it later on, but this is a good starting point. So once you've put that in, hit Apply again, and we're good to go with our application. All right, so after setting up our relative mouse configuration as well as the application and profile, I want you to head on over to the input section under the commands. So on your left-hand nav bar, find the input section, and we can work on our first commands. Now, as you can see, I've already created quite a few commands for quite a few games myself, but for this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to build your very first ones from scratch. So in this screen, I want you to go ahead and press the Add button in the bottom left corner. That will bring up your first new input command. New commands will always be named input command by default, but we can go ahead and change that name to whatever we want to achieve. Now, I said this is going to be basic, so we're going to start off with a very basic one, and that's going to be a jump command. Now, we don't want to set this to public. That would upload our command to the cloud for other users to download. We also don't want to change the help queue or the command execution queue, and instead we're going straight to actions. Down this window, you can either select add from the bottom right, or you can simply right click anywhere in the gray space and select add. And for this, we want a keyboard and we want to have a button press. Now, for me, my default on jump is spacebar, and I want it to be pressed for in between 200 and 200 milliseconds. Now, this press duration is not 100% necessary, but for most commands that require a single button press, it's a good practice to add a little duration to it. Now, after setting up our action, we're going to head over to activation, and we're going to select the profile for which the command should be active. In this case, Tarkov. For the condition, I want to set the condition to application is active, so the command only works while Tarkov is running and selected on screen. That way you can prevent accidental presses while you're tabbed out of the game, doing something in chat, looking up something on a website, what have you. Now the next section, that's the important one. That's the triggers. For the triggers, one thing to always keep in mind, each of your commands needs a unique identifier. So the unique identifier will be set up here in the identifier, and I want you to keep this short, I want to keep it concise, and I want it to be easily memorable for the viewers. So jump is, of course, jump. You can give it an alias if you like, which could be something like spacebar. Now, these are the exclamation mark commands people could use in chat, depending on what trigger we set up. Now, for triggers, there is quite a varied field. This is on version 4.0 of the bot. Version 3.8, the previous iteration, has a few less, but in general, it's pretty much the same. So the big ones are channel points, donations, bits, and free commands. There it is. You also have the option to add word commands, and I'm going to touch on all of those briefly. So if you would want to set up a donation for the jump command, simply click on donation and you'll be greeted with this menu. Now, I recommend going with absolute or exact values for your commands. And reason being, if you have a lot, it gets confusing if you have an in-between range, right? So for this command, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to set it to €1 in my case. You can select the currencies you would want to accept in this currency menu and the route through which you would accept them as well. Now, one more thing, I'm sorry, is down here, you could limit the command to any group of viewers. So you could make it a VIP only command, you could make it a mod only command, or you could have regular viewers, VIPs, and moderators use the command however they wish. Now, when you're done setting it up, simply click somewhere in the gray space and you'll be ready to select the next trigger or move on to the next command. If you want to select another trigger, that is absolutely fine. You can put however many triggers you want for each of your commands. So for the argument's sake, I'm going to add another trigger, and that's going to be bits. I'm going to stick with roughly €1 in bits with the same viewers selected. Now, I also want to give my viewers the possibility to redeem a Twitch channel point reward. That's a mouthful. So I'm going to set up Twitch channel points as well. Now, with these Twitch channel points, you have two options. In version 4.0 of the bot, you can either have it managed or unmanaged. If you haven't set up any rewards on Twitch, going with managed is, well, the way to go. If you set it on managed, the bot will automatically create a Twitch reward for the amount of points you put in here, and that's all you gotta do. If you select unmanaged, you can select any command you've already created on your Twitch profile to be linked to this redeem for the jump in our case here. Now, once we're done setting up our triggers, I want you to hit apply, and the command is done. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do a few more commands, and then I'm going to show you how to test them and fine-tune them. So what we're going to do next is we're going to set up a 360 turn. All right, it's going to be a simple 360. So name it accordingly, add on over to the actions, and this is where the relative mouse movement comes in. So I want you to go ahead and select add mouse movement relative. And we can select 360 degrees to 360 degrees. You can even make that a left-hand turn by simply putting a negative value in here. And the duration is measured in milliseconds. So 1 second is quite fast. So we're going to go with 2.5 seconds for the turn. For the activation, I want to go ahead and select Tarkov again. The conditions will be the same. The trigger will be called 360 or 360 spin, whatever you can come up with. And I want to add a word trigger for this. So whenever anybody in chat types out 360 or spin or turnaround, for example, the command will get executed. Now, hit apply, and the command is saved. And while we're here, let's spruce things up a bit. We're going to create a 360 mag dump. All right? So we're going to go on to the actions. We're going to add a mouse button down command. This will hold down the mouse button until we tell the program to release the mouse button again. So we're going to add a mouse button down for the left button. So to select your mouse button, simply click in this little field and it will fill out whichever button you pressed. Goes for all the mouse buttons, but we want to have a mag dump, so obviously it's going to be left mouse. Now, for most programs, setting up pauses in between each step of your command is very important, because otherwise the bot might fire off each step too fast for your target application to recognize that something different has happened. So I want you to go ahead, right click, add pause of 100 to 100 milliseconds. All right. Next up, I want to move the mouse, and that's going to be movement relative. And that's going to be 360. Well, no, why not? Let's do it negative 360 to negative 360. So this is going to be a left-hand turn. Sorry, negative 360, negative 360, and it's going to be a 2.5 second turn. And then I want you to add another pause. You can go ahead and select right-click, add pause, or you can copy and paste a pause we created earlier. And as the last step, I want to remove the mouse button press. So that's going to be a mouse button up on the left click. Go ahead and apply this. Applying a command saves it. So in case the bot goes down or freezes or anything, you don't have to start from scratch, but instead the last edited tab will get saved. Now, activation, same as before. Select Tarkov or your default profile. And for this one, I'm going to add a condition. So conditions will keep commands from being executed. They won't ignore the command, but rather keep it in queue until all your conditions are met. Now, I don't want the 360 mag dump to go off while I'm sprinting, because sprinting can cancel some animations in Tarkov, and since I've not played in a few years, I'm not quite sure how it handles this now. So if you want to set up a condition, simply click the little down arrow next to the plus and select keyboard condition or mouse condition. Now I want to set a keyboard condition, and I want the condition to be my left shift, which I use for sprinting, is not pressed. With that set up, I'm going to go ahead and add a trigger, and that's going to be 360 mag dump, and it's going to be a free trigger. So whenever somebody types exclamation mark 360 mag dump in chat, the command will go off with no cost. I'm going to hit apply on this, and that command is done. Now, I want to unpause my bot, minimize the bot, and I'm going to go ahead and load into a quick factory raid. I'm going to do practice mode for this because I don't want any scavs jumping me. And I'm going to go ahead next, and I'm going to ready up. All right, once we've loaded into the raid, first thing I want you to do is find a spot, preferably somewhere a bit brighter or somewhere memorable, because we're going to fine-tune our relative mouse config now. Let's go with this little valve on top here. So center it in your screen. Helps tremendously if your monitor supports a dial point or an aim point of some description. Sorry. I had to take out the cat. And I want you to focus the valve or whatever point you choose as best you can in the middle of your screen. It also helps if your weapon has a laser pointer attached to it, or you can go ahead and stand in front of a wall and simply shoot a hole into that wall and use that as a focus point. Now, tap back into the bot, and I'm going to go back to application, and I'm going to select EFT. I'm going to dismiss these warning labels. These warning labels always come up if you have multiple commands with the same monetary value attached to it. That's a thing to avoid. Now, remember when we set up the relative mouse configuration? Right, this is going to come into play now. So when you hit this little cog icon, a widget will come up. The widget says, press F1 to begin measuring the mouse movement. Once you've turned 360 degrees to the right, press F2 to end measuring the mouse movement. You can press F3 to replay the horizontal mouse movement or F4 to replay the vertical. Now this little widget will stay on top of your game once you tap back in. And the recording, which it speaks of with F1, that's hit or miss. You might get lucky or you might get values that are completely off. So yeah, your results may vary on that. Now we've already set up 5,000 and 2,500. So we're going to replay that movement and see where we end up. So just tap back into the game and hit F3. As you can see, the character now spins in place. And 5,000 is clearly overshooting the target. So I'm going to head back into the bot and I'm going to go ahead and select maybe 4,000. I'm not going to touch the vertical just yet because that will be our next step. So I'm going to refocus on the valve, hit F3 again. And we're just a bit short of the valve. So I'm going to go ahead and input maybe 4150 and give that one more shot. And there you are. That's almost pixel perfect and absolutely fine for what we're going to do with it. Now for the vertical mount, it's basically the same thing. So just look up at the ceiling, hit F4, and wait until the character looks down at their feet. And then I want you to push up the mouse ever so slightly. As you can see, there was some kind of resistance to it, showing us that 2500 on the vertical is just a bit much. So I'm going to go down to 23 and I'm going to look at the ceiling again, hit F4. And once my feet are selected, I'm going to scroll up again. Still some resistance. So I'm going to go down to 2100 and I'm going to call it a day. Hit apply and we're good to go. Now, to check if it actually works for the command we set up, I want you to go back to your inputs, find your 360 command, right click on it, select a delay of 5 seconds. This delay is global, so it's going to be for all your commands you're going to test. And this just gives us some time to tap back into the game and not mess things up in the process. So select 5 seconds, right click on it again, select run, and then tap back into the game, give it a few seconds. And if we've set things up correctly, our character will now spin 360 degrees and be done with it. Now, I'm going to check my fire mode for full auto, and we're going to go ahead and test the mag dump. Remember, we've put a condition on it, so it won't trigger while I'm sprinting, and we're going to test that as well. So I'm going to hit run, and I'm just going to keep sprinting, and the command should not execute, but it should execute the second I stop sprinting. Now for this weapon and this magazine size, 2.5 seconds might be a bit slow. As you can see, the mag has been dumped way before my character turned the 360 degrees, but that's fine. That's down to you to fine tune it to your preferred weapon and your liking in general. Now, with these commands out of the way, I want to go ahead and show you at least one intermediate command. For that, we're going to use some mouse movements again, and it's going to be a bit more involved. So I want to create a command that lets us drop the primary weapon. And I want to set that on a global cooldown of 180 seconds. So it's going to be on a 3-minute cooldown. And I'm going to go to actions. Now what I want to do is I want to add a keyboard press for the tab key. I want that to be 100 milliseconds long. That opens up my inventory. Now I want to add a pause after that of 100 to 100 milliseconds. And then I want to add a mouse movement. But this time it's going to be an absolute movement. So the absolute movement takes a cursor and puts it on a specific position on your screen. So select that and bring up the little widget. And as you can see, while I'm moving my mouse around, the cursor will get tracked. So tap back into the game, hit tab, and just roughly find your primary weapon. Once the cursor is centered on your weapon and the values look somewhat precise, I want you to select F1 to save the coordinates. As you can see, they're now entered in here, and once you click out of the little widget, it will get saved. Now we want another pause, so copy and paste that pause, and then we want to add a keyboard button press for delete, and we want that to be 100 milliseconds as well. After that, we're going to add another pause, and we're going to use the tab key to close our inventory again. Hit apply to save the command. Go to activations, select your profile for Tarkov, go to conditions, check if the application is active, and maybe just for the sake of it, add a modifier, a condition, so it's not going to do it while you're sprinting. For the trigger, I'm going to call this drop primary and drop weapon 1, maybe, and I'm going to add a donation of, let's say, $5. This is all down to personal preference and to how generous your audience is, basically. Hit apply and find it in your menu, right click on it, select run, close the inventory, and we should be good. And there goes your weapon. So that's an intermediate command just to showcase what is possible with the bot if you just give it some time, understand the basics, and go on from there. This will conclude this tutorial. Now, a few things I want to add. For the commands themselves. Now, I want you to keep your commands to a somewhat human speed. So you shouldn't spin around 720 degrees in half a second. This might be nauseating for your viewers. It is also very, very distracting for you. It's disorienting to a whole other level. And some programs might find these speeds suspicious. So that's just a public service announcement. Keep your commands as human-like as you can, for your sake and for your viewers' sake. And speaking of for your sake, I want you to keep in mind that these commands might be tempting to use, especially something like Alt F4 or various other annoying commands. But keep in mind that you will get annoyed by these commands and you might lose your patience if your viewers overdo it a bit. And nobody likes that. So don't add too many commands that would piss you off, just to have the most outlandish, most wacky commands for the viewers to try. Because if you're not happy, your viewers aren't happy either. Nobody wants to see a grumpy streamer. All right. Final notes. If you have any more questions at all, I want to encourage you to head on over to our Discord server. It's a community server. I've linked that down in the description. Me, myself, Bomberus, I'm on the community support team there, alongside with Toxic Salt and the man himself, Omsat. So if anything comes up, don't hesitate to ask. There's usually some folks online that are willing to help and might give you some more ideas with a few funny commands. You can, of course, also post any questions you might have in the comment section below. All right. Hope this video helped you set up your first commands. And yeah, enjoy.